Rabbi Wolpe is named most influential rabbi in America by Newsweek and one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world by the Jerusalem Post. His first name's David. David Wolpe is the senior rabbi of Sinai Temple in Los Angeles, California. He was ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary of America in New York in 1987 and is a leader in conservative Judaism. He has taught at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America in New York, the American Jewish University in Los Angeles, and UCLA. He is a columnist for Time.com and has been published in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post, and others. He has been featured on the Today Show, Face the Nation, ABC This Morning, and CBS This Morning. In addition, he has appeared in series on PBS, A&E, History Channel, and Discovery Channel. Rabbi Wolpe is the author of 8 books, including his new book titled David, The Divided Heart. It was a finalist for the National Jewish Book Awards and has been optioned for a movie by Warner Brothers. He was the Danny and Carol Phillips special speaker for the Pepperdine Bible Lecture this year, and we are going to play only the last 14 minutes of his lecture. As you listen to this expert on the life of David, consider with him why David, and by extension, why us. The expository reading comes from 1 Samuel 13, 1 through 15. Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned over Israel for 42 years. Saul chose 3,000 men from Israel. 2,000 were with him at Michmash and in the hill country of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan at Gilgal in Benjamin. The rest of the men he sent back to their homes. Jonathan attacked the Philistines' outpost at Geba, and the Philistines heard about it. Then Saul had the trumpet blown throughout the land and said, "Let the Hebrews hear." So all Israel heard the news. Saul has attacked the Philistine outpost, and now Israel has become obnoxious to the Philistines, and the people were summoned to join Saul at Gilgal. The Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand of the seashore. They went up and camped at Michmash, east of Beth-aven. When the Israelites saw that their situation was critical and that their army was hard pressed, they hid in caves and thickets, among the rocks and in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited 7 days, which is the time that was set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offering." And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him. "What have you done?" asked Samuel. Saul replied, "When I saw that the men were scattering, and that they did not come at the set, and you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering myself." "You have done a foolish thing," Samuel said. "You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." Then Samuel left Gilgal and went up to Gibeah in Benjamin. And Saul counted the men who were with him. They numbered about 600. Now the lecture.
It's important to know that the story doesn't end there. And the reason that it's important is because, at least as I read the Bible, grace is not something that is earned once and forgotten. David goes back to the home that he has completely destroyed. And his oldest son, Absalom, whom he has neglected, rebels against him. And this is because Absalom is upset. Absalom's half-brother, Amnon, because remember David's had several wives. His half-brother has raped his full sister, Tamar. And Absalom, I am again abbreviating the story, kills Amnon, kills his half-brother. And you wonder, through all this, where's David? And the answer is absent. He's not there. He learned absence at his father's knee, so to speak, and now he is an absent father. And in time, Absalom comes and rebels against him. And the reason that this is so powerful is also one of the two animating questions for me in this entire book. The thing that I started out with was, one, can David love? And two, why does he get to be the ancestor of the Messiah? Here's a guy who's an adulterer, who's a murderer, and he's the one that God chooses to be the ancestor of this. It doesn't make any sense. There are more enviable characters that you could pick. And again, it says, when David talks about Jonathan, he doesn't say, I loved him. What does he say? Your love was dearer to me than the love of women. It says the people loved David, Michal loved David, Saul loved David, Jonathan loved David. It never says David loved them. So I wonder, can David love? And then you come to the story of Absalom, who is his son who rebels against him. And he says to Joab, whom you might remember from the guy who made sure Uriah was killed, right? The head of David's troops. He says to him and the other heads of the troops, go out and put the rebellion down. But whatever you do, do not touch a hair of Absalom's head. Right? Absalom, who, by the way, was known for his luxuriant hair and not consequent, but accompanying ego. And what happens? What happens is, of course, as you know, the Bible loves the almost mythologically, you get hoisted by your own petard, and Absalom got hung up by his hair. He's riding through a thicket, and he gets hung up by his hair, and he's hanging there helpless. And this guy comes to Joab and says, oh my God, Absalom's over there hanging helpless. And Joab says, why didn't you kill him? And he says, well, you heard what David said. Remember, Joab is a general, right? He doesn't care what David says in terms of David's softness of heart. So he runs over and he stabs Joab, and he stabs Absalom and kills him. Then he goes back, and David hears the news that Absalom has died, and there is that heartbreaking scene when you realize that actually David can love. Absalom, Absalom, he says, like Faulkner's Absalom. Absalom, the Sutton family being a sort of southern Gothic version of the David story. And he is heartbroken. And he weeps. And he says, you know, better, you should have taken me than my son. And then there is this remarkable scene that tells you how realistic the book of Samuel is. Joab comes to David, and he says to him, cut it out. Stop it. Because there are all these men out there in your army who were willing to give their lives to put down the rebellion for the guy that you're crying about. And if you want to have an army tomorrow, you better stop mourning for the guy that was killed today. And that's where David shows himself more of a king than a father, because he pulls himself together. And he goes and greets his troops. And in that moment, you see the inevitable contradiction, or tension at the very least, between the world as you have to be if you're a leader, and the home that you have to tend to if you're a person. And that it puts almost unbearable tension on David, which leads to the last scene. David has now been king of Israel, and he has achieved maybe the most remarkable thing that he has done in his life, which is he's about to die in his bed. Right? Which is, for a king, an achievement. Right? King Louis XIV said, "Better I should be killed by my enemies than my children." Because that's what happened to kings, right? You've all read the stories, seen the movies. David's about to die in his bed, and Solomon is going to be his heir apparent. Now, after this long drama, and really, this sounds ridiculous, I cannot urge you enough to read Samuel 1 and 2, because the story is even more fascinating and dramatic than I've had a chance to convey. Do you think David's going to give some beautiful, uplifting speech to Solomon? He's going to say, you know, walk in the ways of God, my child, and be faithful and wholehearted. No. He says, listen, this guy who betrayed me, and I promised I wouldn't kill him, Solomon, you know what to do. That's what he says. It's the last speech of The Godfather was modeled on this. I have no doubt about that. Right? He even says, this guy who did me a good turn, make sure he's taken care of. And then the Hebrew, in a very beautiful twist, tells us the following. At the very end of the book of Samuel, at the very first chapter, rather, of the book of Kings, it says, now King David was old, advanced in years. The second chapter, it says, now David was dying. So listen to the difference. King David was old. David was dying. Because when you're dying, you don't die as a king. Right? You die as a person. It's true whether you're a doctor or a priest or a rabbi or whatever. When you die, it's just a human being before God. And so David before God wants to make sure, as every father would, that his son is safe. And so really, it is consistent with David's character and almost with his mission to tell Solomon, these are the enemies you have to watch out for. Forget nice platitudes. I want you to survive as a king. So watch out for this guy, watch out for this guy, and take care of that guy. And you may know that Solomon's brother was his rival for the kingship, and in true David fashion, it took him a little while, but eventually he eliminated him too. And so I came to the end of the book and I said, I mean, not the book of reading, when I was writing, and I said, okay, so why David? Why does David get to be the progenitor of the Messiah? It's not who any of us would pick. And there are lots of reasons given by the tradition. One is you could just say, well, that's how it turned out, historically. But that's not good enough for us, right? And you know that the longest genealogy in the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament is the genealogy that ties Jesus to David, because you have to show that he came from David. The other is that David was the one who united the kingdom, who founded Jerusalem, among his greatest achievements, who wrote the Psalms. So he was religiously such an important figure, but even that doesn't feel like that means he should get to be the Messiah, the person who is the ancestor of the Messiah, when God, remember, wouldn't even let David build the temple. David asked to build the temple, and God said, you have blood on your hands. I don't want you building my temple. So I came up with my own theory, which really came out of the verse where God says to David, you are a man after my own heart. And I thought, what could that possibly mean? Does that mean that God likes murder and adultery? Of course not. What does it mean you're a man after my own heart? And I grew up in a tradition where essentially, because God's complicated, would require a whole nother lecture, but essentially, God is everything. In a very real sense, it's not that we are identical to God, but that everything that exists in some way is willed by or participates in whatever God is. So who best represents God in this world as a model? The human being who is the most comprehensive expression of what it is to be human. And David was everything. Yes, he was a murderer and an adulterer. He was also a poet, and a warrior, and a sibling, and a father, and a lover, and a listener, and a friend, and a founder, and a creator, and every single thing that you could be in the ancient world. An underdog, and a leader. A child that we experience, and an old man whom we see and listen to pass away. Every human experience that you could have and record in the ancient world, all of it is summed up in one character, which may be why he's called beloved. Because the truth is, as human beings, there is some part of us that loves everything human, that is attached to everything human. And when we see someone who is this fullest expression, we understand why redemption can't come from half a person. Redemption has to come from the full expression of the human heart, which, as you know, includes all things, black and white, good and bad, top, bottom, side to side, creative, mundane, sacred, profane, everything is summed up in the heart. And everything that was summed up in the human heart finds its expression in this one remarkable figure. And so, as I finished, I thought it makes sense that David is a man after God's own heart. Because David is a kind of expression of all of our hearts. The best hearts and some of the worst. And that's why we need a David. And that's why we need a God. And that's why we pray that one day the worst will be gone and we will all be redeemed. Thank you.